something else, and it was my generation, and I was, gobsmacked.
There was a band coming out of Ireland that seemed very sincere. There was some real kind of raw emotion on their album.
But it's all right. It's all right. We're moving mysterious way.
For 25 years, U2 have masterfully maintained their position as Irish rock royalty. The band have slowly and surely conquered the world, but their journey was by no means easy. U2 never enjoyed the phenomenon known as overnight success. Oh no, it was hard graft all the way, and at several key points in their career, the band was forced to gamble every single penny they had. Who could have guessed that in the late 1970s, John McKenna, speaking on The Late Late Show, would be so prophetic?
Ladies and gentlemen, what can I say about these august men, these titans among rock and rollers? Dave McCulloch's, Jude Carr's, mine and yours, the band for the future, the 80s or 90s, who knows? U2.
Story for young people. There's a place I go that takes me far away. There's a TV show where I can grow. Sometimes the hero takes me, sometimes I can't let go. Hello, hello. There's a picture book with coloured photographs. There's a comic strip that makes me laugh. Sometimes the hero takes me, sometimes I don't wanna know. Hello, hello. Stories for boys. Stories for boys. Stories for boys. Stories for boys.
But what made a traditional power rock four-piece so special? By the late 70s and early 80s, the music scene was polarised by punks and new romantics, neither of whom had very much time at all for what they saw as tedious, self-indulgent, passé rock and roll bands.
I first came across this young group in Dublin. I was at a party, and this chappie approached me, very intent, very serious, glasses, perm Jimi Hendrix hair but blonde, Afghan hippie coat. Asked me questions about the machinery of the music business, about song publishing, about tour support, that sort of thing. And it was unusual that people would ask about that. And then he gave me his demo tape, another demo tape, and written on it was his name, Adam, his phone number, and the name of the group in which he played bass guitar, U2. So because of his questions, I paid attention to the tape, and when I got home, I actually listened to it. And there was one song that stuck out particularly called Shadows and Tall Trees. But by and large, the group weren't very good. The guitarist was very good. Edge was already shimmering brightly.
Yeah, a guitarist, the Edge. Well, I think, the Edge is unusual as far as, you know, massive rock god guitarists go, because, you know, you have to look at Steve Vais and Yngwie Malmsteens and, you know, Blackmore's and, you know, Hendrix, and, you know, there's all these like massive rock guitar players, which, you know, are technically diverse. Some even more so than others, you know, completely into the techniques of the guitar, which is phenomenal, you know. It'd be great to play, you know, 350 notes in, you know, half a bar. Fantastic. You know, one phrase consisting of, you know, everything that's possible on the guitar. You know, that's great experimentation, but some of the best, you know, songs of all time have some of the simplest solo patterns or none. Now, you know, Edge very early on stayed away from those type of solos anyway.
The Edge is a fantastic guitarist and a real rock hero to a generation. However, it's quite understated sometimes. Although the guitars are really to the fore of the songs, the way in which they play them, there's still very much that emphasis in everything they package up as a rock band. And it's almost like, yeah, you can't have a great rock band without a great rock guitarist. And occasionally he'll come to the front. You know, there'll be that bit in the show where he comes to the front or goes out a bit into the audience on a podium. But for the main part, that's not the emphasis. It's very much more, he's one of the boys.
I think he's a master at producing an enormous sound. Big sweeping spread chords, some great riffs, great high guitar stuff. A very effective rhythm guitar player when needed, but I personally, as a guitar player, don't really think of the Edge as being one of the world's greatest rhythm players. Certainly not like a Mick Taylor or a Rick Parfitt. But he can groove. If you listen to the guitar groove I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, it absolutely is hypnotic. It just drives the thing along as much as any element of the rhythm section.
And he's very unique in the sense that when you hear a U2 record, his guitar playing is very distinct, not because he's a lead guitar player, but because his use of chords, effects, and the inversions he uses are very distinct. And he and Andy Summers from the Police have a similar use of effects at certain points, delays and choruses and stuff. So I'll start with that one. And I'm going to illustrate the type of ideas musically and effects-wise he uses on Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For. Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For is basically 3 chords. In the original key it's actually in C sharp, but to simplify things I'm just going to play it in C. It allows me to play some open strings as well. So what he's actually doing is he's using a unit, which in this case is just a small one on the floor. He's got a rack of stuff, rather like stuff I have behind me there. And he'll play a note, and then another note will be played by the effects unit. And then if you turn that into a rhythm, and then the drummer just has to pick up on that. So he'll set the tempo, or the tempo will have been set before they start playing. So So that's essentially the 3 chords that he's using on Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For.
Is Edge a great guitarist? It's all subjective, of course.
Now, you know that band U2, right? They basically got this one sound, don't they? Hello! Some old Celtic bollocks. The Edge, yeah, right. So, without these effects, they're nothing, right? It's just all effects. Even a troll-like figure can recreate them. I'll give you a demonstration of a catastrophic technical failure at a U2 gig, right?
He has an amazing ability to make sound. He's a sonic soldier. A couple of bits of wire and you could make a spaceship.
I think the big difference for the Edge was coming when they did in the new wave era as it's defined, was that coming out of the 70s there was a style against huge rock solos and whatever. However, as they've gone on and their sound has sometimes been bigger or smaller and they've played around with it, they've wanted to get more funky, like albums like Achtung Baby. He's wanted to use those real skills, but still, you know, he's a post-punker at heart, and I don't think he ever wants to get into some kind of Eric Clapton situation, and that's kind of worked well within the band.
He's a very individual guitar player. He's taken a lot of things that were done before, sometimes by psychedelic bands. There's a load of techniques that hark back to Piper at the Gates of Dawn from Pink Floyd, but he's made the use of effects his own, and that for me makes a great guitar player. He's not a speedy player. He's not someone like Richie Blackmore who can play at 90 miles an hour, certainly not, but he doesn't need to be. And I think to sum him up, he's a majestic player and he's creates an enormous sense of power and size within U2. Absolutely wonderful.
Early on with U2, you know, it was sort of a whole punk, post-punk thing coming in. So, you know, where U2 sort of, you know, were coming through. I mean, they'd been around during that whole period, influenced by bands like The Clash and subsequent bands like that.
And they incorporated into a sound that was lively, vibrant, energetic, confrontational in some way, but started to develop an individuality from an early time.
I was impressed by the Edge, because I thought, oh, that's interesting what he's doing there. And he also played a bit of piano as well. And the rhythm section was tight, and they were good, you know. Bono's voice was good, and it's interesting because, like seeing Hendrix, or like seeing the Beatles, or like seeing the Stones, or, you know, some of those bands, they leave an imprint on your mind.
Since day one, U2 have identified with the underdog, the unloved, the outsiders, their audience. The band was also set up on a democratic basis, which is unusual in the music business. Often there's one main songwriter who reaps the lion's share of the profit. U2 negotiated a straight four-way split between themselves, and it was this simple ethic of equality which galvanised the band where so many others have broken up. Perhaps there was something in this sense of fairness that the audience responded to. They felt included.
Then, as now, U2 were ahead of the pack. And not by great musical skill or anything. That was evolving, but just really by determination. You know, the moves they made sometimes were like chess, and it generally worked. And then here in America and in Canada, they toured their bums off. They played every little bloody toilet they could be allowed to plug in, and built it from that. They worked very hard.
By getting the crowd to sing, "If You Walk Away, I Will Follow," U2 managed to get their audience to pledge an allegiance to the man who came in from the cold. It was bonding on a major scale, aimed classically at the boy, the disaffected teenager in a troubled world. From the very start, Bono was keen to transcend the Irish problem. He was the new youth that just wanted to get out and live his life. He didn't want politics at that point to be part of his portfolio, and he wasn't afraid to state his case.
There's only one flag I believe in, that's a white flag, all right?
That being the flag of peace and love. I don't think Bono had surrender in mind at all. In a religious country where beliefs could get you shot or maimed at the drop of a foolish remark, Bono seemed fearless in his proclamation.
Religion has torn our country in two. I've no time for religion. I have a strong belief in God, which I don't talk about at a moment's notice.
The band actually has both Protestant and Catholic members. Larry comes from a traditional working-class North Dublin Catholic background, while Bono is from a mixed marriage. The Edge is of Welsh stock, and Adam was brought up as a Church of England Protestant. Belief has been a big part of this band. In one of his earliest recorded interviews for television, Bono sums up the band's ethos in a few moments and shows that he's well aware of all the pros and cons of being a Dublin band.
Coming from Dublin, I think has helped us. You know, to break out of Dublin was very difficult. If you can break out of Dublin, you can break into anywhere in the world, London, New York, whatever. You know, I've enjoyed it. There seems to be a hunger and a thirst for our sort of music. There's a lot of sort of glossy wallpaper music in the charts at the moment, and this is not what this band is about. This band is about, you know, it's much more of a gut feeling, a sweat or whatever it is, but people want that. That for me is everything in music, is that commitment. And we're not about hiding behind our haircuts. We're not about posing and sort of, you know, the star trip, you know, and there seems to be a hunger and thirst for that. So it's beyond nationality, it's beyond where you come from, it's just we satisfy.
When U2 was starting out in Dublin, I was a lot of the time in England, but you still became aware of them because of this talk of this band that were really happening inside a very minor context, you know, but they worked very hard at propagating themselves even at that very early point. You know, there'd be sort of homemade posters stuck all over the place and that sort of thing. And there were tons of bands in Dublin, and some fairly good ones. But when U2 was signed and U2 started happening, of course, Dublin was swarmed upon by A&R men, like Liverpool had been, you know, after the Beatles happened and so on, like Manchester was swamped after Stone Roses, you know, like San Francisco was swamped after psychedelic music and so on and so forth. Dublin was swamped by eager A&R men looking for the next U2. And no one really came out of that successfully, no additional bands. And people have commented, they've said, well, it wasn't really fair on these bands because U2 were so jolly good that they didn't really stand a chance, you know. My answer is the reverse. U2 drew all these people to Ireland, to Dublin, to see all these bands. There wasn't a band bloody well good enough. That's why. Otherwise, they would have been treble mega.
No, I think when U2 first came out, they looked like any other band, really, you know. But it was the time that they came out. It was the end of the punk scene, and it was perhaps time for something new. And so what they did is they've always had this originality about them, which at first I think people perhaps looked at them and thought, you know, what exactly is going on there? But they didn't break straight away. They sort of built their way up until they got that sound and that attitude that they have, that they're famous for.
Mix that with the like a feeling of youth culture, the punk movement, which was very, you know, antisocial in a lot of ways, but certainly a social commentary. I think they drew from that, they were influenced from that, and instead of going out and being like anti-Christ or anti-establishment, they wanted to be voicing the same way, but not be anti-stuff, just explain, be explanatory. This is how we're feeling, this is, you know, it's a subtler approach, I think, lyrically.
Another thing to remember is that U2 had a cult following in the States. So although they were breaking it and they were doing some good gigs over here, they had done some live work in the States. And the singles were being played on American TV. And I think this was setting up the huge thing that was about to follow. You know, it's like the Americans, often you find an act makes it in the UK and then they transfer to the States, but the Americans had embraced U2, certainly if not before us, at the same time.
U2 were a live band and Frank Barcelona gave them life on a big stage. At the same time, similar inroads were being made into the European market. France, Germany, Scandinavia and some of the Baltic states were a very strong commercial draw for bands in the early 80s. They could actually go there and earn some palpable money while enjoying the thrills of being a band on the road abroad, and often receiving so much more adulation out there than they were used to at home. But as far as the managers were concerned, touring abroad was all good training for the onslaught that was to follow. Full-blown global fame.
Every time you saw them, be it live or on TV in their very early days, they held your attention. They held your attention in a way that I'm not quite sure why. I don't understand exactly what it is about this band that makes me feel I want to see them. But there is something there. They have the potential to be more than just a good band, having a couple of albums out, doing a few tours. They could be around for a long time. They could be a very important band. U2 had that element to that. This could be the next very important band to come out of Ireland and take music forward. And as it proved, they did.
This triumvirate of forces secured greater exposure for U2, and as a result the band's profile and acclaim grew steadily year by year. There was no one moment, no turning point like that experienced by Michael Jackson when he moonwalked for the first time to Billie Jean. It was a long, hard slog, but made easier meanwhile, as back at Island Records, U2 were showing good sales figures for their first album, Boy.
This was released in 1980 and it was the first of the Steve Lillywhite produced albums. The importance was it introduced that sound. It was a post-punk album and we were ready for something around about then, 1980. Those big anthemic singles, things like A Day Without Me, with those huge open spaces, those kind of sounds, which was incredibly powerful. It introduced us to the sound of the Edge. The Edge, a master with all his guitar effects and everything else. I think the thing about the Boy album, which remains a firm favourite with a lot of U2 fans, was it was quite simple. There were a lot of open spaces. If you listen to tracks like The Electric Co, fantastic track, and it's big. I think that's probably the best adjective that describes that album. It's big. You can put it onto the average medium-sized blaster and turn it up and it just sounds huge.
Boy was their debut album. It was released in 1980. It was released a few months after I'd seen them live performing a lot of that material at the Electric Ballroom, when they were the support act with orchestral manoeuvres in the dark and talking heads. Now, having heard it already live, it made a certain sense in terms of this. These songs are very good. They're very well constructed. They're interesting. They're intricate. They allow the Edge, who was already developing his own guitar style, to work within a frame style that didn't stifle him. And Bono wasn't a great singer, But even on record, he had that ability to enunciate songs in a way that made them interesting. So you listen to tracks like Stories for Boys or Out of Control, and what they had was a quality of post-punk, but post-punk in a way that hinted at a direction that would incorporate Celtic influence, punk influence, classic rock, but also the environment of the time. And that was the beauty of what U2 could do. It was about the environment of the time. Boy, it was the right album at the right time. And you listen to what was going on with a lot of other bands in 1980, a lot of albums which came out at that particular juncture. Boy was ahead of its time. It was an album which sounded like it belonged slightly further into the 1980s. Not because sound-wise they were using state-of-the-art technology. No, what they were doing is developing a style of music which you knew wasn't really going to come to fruition for a couple of years. So it was basically, this is an album slightly ahead of where it should, the world is. The world is going to catch up. And when the world does catch up, oh boy, are we in for surprises.
The album and one of its most famous songs, I Will Follow, defined the U2 sound for years to come. It was a dazzling blend of agile, hard-edged guitar riffs, drums and bass that drive the whole track, and Bono's vocals blazing with a passion that emanates from the very core of his soul. The absence of keyboards or horns and the sheer confidence to say rhythm, drums, bass, what more could we possibly need? That was U2 all over. It was the people's anthem of that summer, I Will Follow, that forged the U2 machine.
It's one of those crowd bouncers, you know, and again lyrically, it's talking about youth, the transition from youth to adulthood. You know, like I'm young and I don't quite understand. I'm sitting in the house and they're tearing the walls down. I was looking out the window a minute ago, and now I can see myself, and I think, what, you know, all those things are what youths relate to. You know, who am I? You know, and all of a sudden I got hair on my dick. It's a bit longer than it was before. What's going on? My voice has just changed. You know, there's hair growing in bits where only your dad had hair. You know, all those things go into the pot. So, you know, when you then reach out in a song and talk to them and go, hey, this is what I'm experiencing.
It was post-punk. The MTV era was absolutely rife. It was pre-Guns N' Roses, which is an interesting point to make. And so we were ready for a different take on rock. If you also consider the early 80s, we had a lot of the new romantic stuff coming along, a lot of the electro-pop, which for many pop rock fans lacked any real power and substance. So the time was ripe for U2 to come along with the scene. Sure, the Stones were still touring and they were still successful, but we wanted something new. The Stones had been around for years and we wanted a new take on it. I Will Follow came along, and its size, its power was quite commanding.
But then there's that wonderful piece in the middle, you know, with those trills on the guitar and the doom, 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 doom. You know, your eyes like a circle, you know, but it's your eyes, but it's your eyes, you know, it's coming up again, you know, bang, and it just goes in. I mean, you know, intentionally, I don't know whether it was intentionally they looked at the dynamics, but the dynamics are perfect in that song, absolutely perfect.
Make yourself at home. Your eyes make a circle, and I see you when I go in there. Yeah, but it's your eyes, but it's your eyes,
The unavoidable truth about U2 is that they're a classic example of the sum being worth more than the parts. Dave Kavanagh, who was their first agent for gigs in Ireland, remembers they played in an unusual venue called a television club holding about 1,500 people. and they did about 8 other shows around the country, but that was it. There was already a sense that this band was going to be big. It had survived in the UK, winning shining reviews on the way, and buoyed by confidence, the band's trademark self-belief was clearly visible on their homecoming tour. The success of this led to the next album being hurried along, and many felt that October lacked a clear direction and suffered from second album syndrome, a common ailment in the music industry.
I think the October album, in many ways, although now when we look back on it, it was incredible, but the fact that it wasn't commercially all that successful at the time, I think made us have to really enforce our commitment to the importance of how we felt about what we were doing, and we weren't going to devalue that record in any way by playing any games.
October, and the leaves are stripped bare of all they wear. What do I care?
October was the turning point in everybody's commitment to the group, from Chris Blackwell's to Paul McGuinness's, to Adam Clayton's, to me, to mine, to our audience, to everything, because it broke the rules as a group. It was a spiritual record, and a post-punk band makes, and it made a lot of people feel very nervous, you know. And, you know, as Paul paced up and down Control Room, you know, and Lily White, you know, was kind of holding the...
Well, he was holding it together.
He was holding it together, you know, with his head on the desk, his hand on the faders, and he was wondering if he'd get out of there alive, you know. And it was all this real tense situation. Because I didn't know where I was, and I was just saying, well, I'll try to sing this song, I try to stand up, but I can't find my feet, you know, I can't sing this, is this Latin, what is this that I'm singing, does this make sense in Latin? If somebody find a person who can speak Latin, you know, what is this, you know, listening to Gregorian chant, all this, just a sense something was coming out of it. Of course, it's truly Irish, you know, you learn it, if you understand the Irish, you know, the two basic rules, you know, religion and politics, don't talk about them. There's this band walk into it, into walls of it, you know, boom, and end up with a broken nose.
I give it to you.
But as always, it was the band's back-to-basics touring approach that helped them come up smelling of roses. Despite playing only 4 dates in Ireland, the war tour headed out into the world and spawned 2 remarkable pieces of creativity. The film, Under a Blood Red Sky, while the album of the live show, U2 Live at Red Rocks, really did capture the band at one of their finest moments. What the audience didn't know was at the time, the band had every last cent riding on that show, and just before the event, a massive electrical storm had threatened to cancel the whole thing completely, leaving the band, the crew and the management quite literally washed up. But as always in their career, that spirit and that magical energy which had sustained them for so long kicked in, and they pulled the whole thing off, playing a fantastic gig while freak electric power kept arcing across the stage between the PA stacks. The band, well, they just played on.
Once U2 decided that they were really going for it full tilt, their dreams were so ludicrous, really. And what happened? Their dreams came true. You know, because when they initially started having these dreams, there was no way that they could be the biggest band in the world, because they weren't fit for it. But now you see, if you look back over their songs for the last quarter of a century or so, there's tons of really good songs there. And that's what bands are about. It's about the songs, you know, be it the Rolling Stones or Bob Dylan or anyone, it's about the songs, you know. And they've got tons of really good songs.
I was really into, especially Under Blood Red Sky. It was like, oh my God, it was never off. And a guy moved in to share a room in the place I was living, and he went, oh wow, you got Under Blood Red Sky, and you know, that thing was like 11 every Friday. Till the end I was going, man, can we put something else on? He's going, I thought you liked it. I'm going, yeah, but it's been like 3 months. You know, but Red Rock was just, you know, that Under a Blood Red Sky, yeah, just phenomenal. For me, that, you know, played so much. It caught me, that moment caught me. You know, it rained all the way up, and the concert button was going, oh my God, and they were going to film this, and it was like, oh man, look, just don't. And they were like, no, we're going to do it anyway, whatever, we'll just do it. And he's going, is the people going to turn up? And it stopped raining. U2 and us stopped raining, they did, and it was a blinder.
1984 saw the start of a brilliant but perhaps unusual collaboration between the legendary Brian Eno and U2. Once a member of the cutting-edge pop band Roxy Music, Eno had become renowned in latter years for producing some very esoteric and minimal recordings. It was a pairing that Chris Blackwell at Island Records resisted at first. He saw Eno as too radical for U2 at a time that he was trying to mainline the band, not sideline them. But Eno came up trumps, as U2 had hoped, and brought a creative intelligence to the studio which gave birth to the kind of sonic experience the band were really looking for. The result was The Unforgettable Fire, an album which forged the sound that would characterise U2 in the 1980s.
U2's greatest record to me is The Unforgettable Fire. Always have been, always will be. To me, that was a culmination of everything they've been building up to with Boy, October and War. It's really an album where the epic and the anthemic comes to its fruition, where it comes into its own. Every song just feels like it envelops you. And Pride in the Name of Love is quite magnificent. It's a moment when U2 seem to actually psychologically lock in to someone like Martin Luther King. For that moment, they locked into something very special. The Unforgettable Fire itself as a title track is magnificent. 4th of July, Elvis Presley in America. These are great songs. Absolutely wonderful.
Personally, I would say Unforgettable Fire, because I find it just so different from everything else they've done, and such a startling, moody thing to do in the middle of the 80s when everybody else was being so shiny and happy and poppy.
Every track is special. Every song has its own feel of importance in the nicest sense of the word, because the band weren't trying to be important, they were trying to make great music, and they strove and succeeded. So to me, that's the culmination of U2's great period. And you listen now to The Unforgettable Fire, you can hear so much of the Celtic origin, which other bands took on as well. You can hear so much of their roots in there, but you can also hear the fusion of something special. There's a magic and charisma about that record that defines it and defies any other record by U2 to stand up to it.
The Dublin lads had found their mad professor, and all that was left was to taste the magic potion and test it on the stage. So the band took their album out on tour, this time including Spain and the States, where the success was even greater than in Europe. It seemed they could do no wrong, and it was with this confidence that they approached the stage at Live Aid in 1985, wearing their hearts firmly on their sleeves as they opened with Sunday Bloody Sunday.
Sunday Bloody Sunday.
You could say it was a controversial choice. It appeared on 1983's War album, again a Steve Lillywhite production and a very powerful sounding album. But it was one of the focal points of Live Aid. A lot of people, bear in mind, didn't really know too much about U2, even though the previous couple of albums had charted.
I can't believe the news today. I can't close my eyes, make it go away. How long must we sing this song?
Choosing to do very, quite hard-hitting songs. They had really tuned into the other side of what Live Aid was about. It wasn't just a big charity event with lots of nice people hugging each other and going, yeah, we're doing something really good. By doing a song like Sunday Bloody Sunday, they were like, yeah, we've got these echoes, we've thought about these things in our lyrics. They weren't trying to pat themselves on the back, but they were just saying, plain and simple, yeah, not all pop has to be frivolous. And at this point, even frivolous pop is getting meaningful, even if it's just for this day.
I think the reality at Live Aid was that you turned up and you did what you had in your set, in your live set. And Sunday Bloody Sunday, I don't see the relationship between Sunday Bloody Sunday and Live Aid. So I believe, like a lot of the bands in the day, they didn't think about that, they just got on stage and did it. They probably thought, oh, Sunday Bloody Sunday will sound pretty good, so let's do that. And then the connotations of the song has only appeared later.
Politics has never obstructed or divided U2 as a band, nor have religious or social values. But the band members were essentially brought up during a time where firm beliefs were considered to be a part of a rounded character. Fame has never compromised U2's beliefs, and Bono has been the band's mouthpiece against global oppression and injustice. There will always be critics who believe that music and politics just don't mix, but Bono's view is that if there's a crowd of 50,000 people listening to every word you say, you better think carefully before you open your mouth. He also professes to feel that music has a healing effect, and he likes fans to leave a gig feeling positive and liberated. Larry senses that fans come for many reasons to hear them play, and if they feel inspired to join Amnesty International as a result, that's fine. But he doesn't see any one reason being more important than the other. One thing Live Aid did clearly mark was U2's move up to global status.
U2 became one of the most important bands of the 1980s. And I think the moment that really transformed them from being a big band into a giant, an all-time great, was Live Aid. When they performed on Live Aid, it suddenly all made sense. And they had a worldwide audience of tens, hundreds of millions watching one of the performances of the day.
Having conquered the planet, U2 headed back to the studios with Brian Eno and the trusted Daniel Lanois, who had worked with Eno for many years. Where Eno was inspiration, Lanois was the patient technician. Again, they pulled out all the sonic stops and managed another fine, fresh take on the U2 sound.
Well, they've made some great albums, great variable albums, different styles, the use of different producers. People like Steve Lillywhite in the early days, Flood, Brian Eno, Daniel Lanois, all give a slightly different approach. I tend to prefer the sound of the earlier albums, but for me, undoubtedly, the killer album is The Joshua Tree. Those massive songs, I still haven't found what I'm looking for, With or Without You, Where the Streets Have No Name. Any one of those singles on any album would be brilliant, and they got those three on one album. Absolutely fantastic. So I would have to cite that as being the album, and I think a lot of fans would probably agree with that.
They've always brought out quality, but I think personally my favourite album is The Joshua Tree, because it was also at a time where the band were quite innocent as well, before they got too much into the politics and stuff like that. It was definitely more about the music and what they wanted to do.
The Joshua Tree was the right album at the right moment and transformed U2 into a multi-million selling group. Songs like I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For and Where the Streets Have No Name were anthems that could echo around the world's most gigantic stadiums. With this came the financial rewards that enabled the band to push their imaginations to the limit. Their next project was to produce a film, Rattle and Hum, which covered the band's tour and captured them at some of their finest moments.
U2 live, when they're really on, it's fantastic. When they're really in full flight, it's amazing, because what happens is it multiplies, you know, because Bono talks about how it's strange for an artist. You know, there must be something wrong with an artist's makeup, you know, meaning himself. If they would write a very personal song and want to sing it to 80,000 people and wants to be on a platinum record, and that they need this response from people. You know, when Bono's on stage and he's getting all this love from this audience, maybe 80,000 people or something, and he's giving love back, the whole thing snowballs, you know. And if this all sounds a bit hippy-dippy and cosmic, well, I'm really sorry, because this is what happens, folks, in the real world, believe it or not, if you get into something. And when they're on, the U2 live experience is fantastic. Communication central.
Having stripped down their imagery and stage props to give a more intense and stark effect on the Rattle and Hum tour, they wound up the 1980s with the Lovetown tour, a collaborative adventure with blues legend B.B. King.
Yeah, where were you born?
Lovetown.
he's met everybody from, like, you know, I mean, he wrote a song. He wrote a song for B.B. King. He recorded it at Sun Studios and got B.B. King to sing on it. And he joined him live on stage. I mean, B.B. King, you did that for B.B. King.
It was a wonderful visual feast and fans simply lapped it up. The tour took in Australia, New Zealand and Europe, finally bringing U2 to the end of the 1980s.
Whatever you do, don't try and sound like U2.
At the turn of the decade, U2 disappeared to Berlin for much-needed rest and recuperation. During that gap year, the band experienced a creative renaissance. They returned to the stage and the studio completely reinvented. Just as importantly, they now had unlimited spending power, and this explosive cocktail of creativity and cash culminated in the dark grooves of Achtung Baby and the futuristic Zoo TV tour.
My favourite U2 album would be Achtung Baby. And of course I'm biased because having worked on the tour that embraced the album and vice versa, I feel that it was the most dangerous music that U2 have ever made, the most fucked up music that U2 ever made, sonically and emotionally, and very dangerous and adventurous and a brave record for them to make. That for me personally at this point in time would be the pinnacle. From learning as they went, they became fantastic. Because sometimes you judge people by the company they keep. Sometimes you judge people by the company they seek. U2 have always been interested in their peers. And not only have they become friends with a lot of these people, but they've also recorded with a lot of these people. Keith Richard on the Smile Jamaica concert. Bob Dylan on Rattle and Hum. Willie Nelson on Slow Dancing. Johnny Cash on The Wanderer. Johnny Cash. If U2 had only written the song One, weren't even a band, didn't record it, and this monument of American music, Johnny Cash, recorded this song and did it better than they could ever have done. And if they were to record it, which we know they did, their version's fantastic. Johnny Cash's version is it's just mega.
Did I disappoint you? Leave a bad taste in your mouth. You act like you never had love. You want me to go without. Is it too late tonight to drag the past down into the light? We're one, but we're not the same. We get to carry each other, carry each other.
Alongside Eno was a character called Willie Williams, who was in charge of art, commerce and logistics. He'd worked with U2 since the early 80s and was in charge of the nuts and bolts, or to be exact, the nuts and bulbs, of which there were millions. The Zoo TV tour derived its wow factor from several huge projection screens, video walls and Trabant cars carefully suspended, craftily containing a large part of the lighting rig and even a belly dancer. It was clear to all working on the project as the tour progressed that the new image of U2 had been galvanised. This tour would inaugurate some new concepts to the world's touring stage too. Apart from satellite link-ups with MTV and phone calls to the White House, Bono insisted on a stage in front of a stage so he could get out into the audience. After the initial cries of horror concerning the safety of such a thing, it was created, and it's now known in the industry as the B stage. Naturally, it takes a lot of people to mount such an awesome production. They were able to make up 5 11-a-side football teams to play in a league, including 1 women's team whilst they were out on that tour. It was The Edge who summed up this massive endeavour and expense as being our reward for 10 years of restraint. In the 90s, Willie Williams was quoted as saying, "There will never be a tour like it." And he was right, until the next U2 tour.
U2 never wanted to be a small band. They always wanted, after the initial uncertainties and learning how to play their instruments and learning how to do songs, they always wanted to be enormous.
Fuck yeah! You got, oh Lordy, you been stealing from the thieves and you got caught in the headlights of a stretch car. Now you're stuck.
Seeming unable to put a foot wrong, U2 attempted to better Zoo TV in the late 90s with the Pop Mart tour. It had been breathtakingly expensive to mount the 100 square metre screen used on the Lovetown tour, but for Pop Mart, U2 invested a staggering $7 million on a 700 square metre screen to use as a backdrop. You would hope that Bono had at last found what he was looking for. As always, Bono was utterly confident in the whole creative process. He professes, if you can't be fanciful about your art, then you're really betraying the people who've given you that freedom in the first place. Be true to who you are and what it is that you want to do. Run with it, run amok with it, and I think we've always done that. As annoying as we can be, at least we're not dull.
The guy is just absolutely fearless, and he doesn't care who is watching him or who's there or whatever. He will do and say whatever he wants, which, you know, you've got to have a lot of respect for the guy to do.
Bono is a great commanding frontman. The only analogy I can make is Jagger, with the strutting and the working the crowd and the crowd reaction and eliciting a reaction from the crowd. Bono is the man.
Technically, Bono isn't a fantastic singer. I mean, you wouldn't sort of listen to him singing on his own and think, wow, you know, shit, he's got a really great voice. But it's the fact that he fits in with everything in that band, and that he knows his limits and he knows what he's capable of singing, which is why he does so well. And also, he's got a very distinct voice. You know, so when you hear if it's a new U2 song, you know it's them because of, one, the general band sound, you know, and two, because of his voice.
So you never knew love till you crossed the line of grace, and you never felt wanted till you'd someone slap your face, and you never felt alive till you'd almost wasted away. You had to win. At the top of the class.
There is a technique with the great singers. There is some form of something technical that you can analyse, but great female singers, you know, you take someone like Annie Lennox, who is a great singer technically, that happens to have great feel, okay? You take someone like Kiki Dee, who's got both of them. He's got a great technical feel and a God-given wonderful voice. Bono has not got, he's not sat down there, you can't say he's got a polished, even vibrato. He doesn't really have any vibrato to speak of, but it does not matter. He's a performer, and he performs those songs wonderfully. Great feel, great conviction, and great style.
Well, I mean, I think his impassioned vocal performances get to a lot of people, myself included. When he does it well, it's great, it's impassioned, and he's not scared. He's a show-off, a natural show-off, I think, and that's what you want with the frontman.
That this idea that I think a lot of people now, not just even music fans, but, you know, on the news, using Bono's name is almost like a byword for a new pop culture messiah who's saying something a bit more deep and meaningful. You know, probably even my mum has an opinion about what he's got to say about world politics. However, I think, you know, for the fans, perhaps there's always that element of, well, maybe I don't agree with everything he says, but I like his music. Or other people who go, I like what he says, but I can't stand you too. There's going to be those contradictions, and, you know, any performer like that is going to slip up from time to time because they are going to be just a bit too earnest at the wrong moment.
It's bigger than us, but love is not what you think.
U2 first started out, I think they always had the belief and philosophy that they wanted to reflect their environment. And in the early days, I feel they really did reflect what was going on, especially in Belfast, and the Irish problem through their songs. I mean, songs like Sunday Bloody Sunday and New Year's Day really did reflect something important. And they weren't so much preaching as being social commentators. And they put across a point of view, which I think a lot of people appreciated, because here was a band who were prepared to actually stand up for beliefs and to be a voice for people. Not that they were particularly trying to be the voice for the people, but that's what happened. They were prepared to use their songs to actually say, there's a lot of troubles here, we're trying to sort of resolve and solve, and if we can actually get this across to people through some of our songs, maybe one or two people will listen, it could improve things. Subsequently, I think preaching has taken over. They have become, and let's be honest, they is Bono. Bono has become a world global ambassador who feels he can rub shoulders with the great and the good of the political world, and feels that he can call up his mate, the President of the United States of America, or his pal Tony Blair in Downing Street, go and have tea and solve world's problems. Well, I think the man's an idiot personally for doing it. And I'd love him to explain one thing, which he came out recently with, which I think is one of the most idiotic, stupid and naive comments ever. And that was, Tony Blair and Gordon Brown are the Lennon and McCartney of politics. Excuse me? What do you mean by that?
You can't knock down the walls of Babylon if you don't infiltrate. And Bono reaches these people. His rock and roll celebrity draws them to him. Oh, I'd love an autograph for my daughter. And thus he has their ears. And thus he can be influential.
You know, bass and drum wise, you know, they're quite basic in their rhythm section. It's driving, it's quite simple, it's never overcomplicated. Very subtle, you know, the Edge's keyboard stuff when he plays piano on certain tracks and stuff. Again, it's very simple, very, you know, nothing very complex. And its motive in that way is not for you to sit back and to drop yourself into it and relax. It brings you to the music. It makes you want to listen. It makes you want to get up. It makes you want to follow.
They're the two guys that people think of last. You know, when you think U2, you think of Bono and the Edge, right? But you know, the other two are the ones that you don't really think about too much. The reason I think really that they're the secret weapon behind U2, because you know, you've got this great sort of straightforward drummer and a great driving bass player. So it's like you've got this rock rhythm section mixed with this sort of soundscape of guitar and layers of guitar and stuff. And again with Bono's sort of vocals. So they're, you know, although I think people would realise that they're not there if ever they weren't there, kind of thing. You know, they're sort of like the secret weapon. In a way it's kind of easier for a three-piece band if there aren't solos, because it doesn't really drop out the rhythm, but it still means they have to be solid all the time, like any rhythm section kind of thing, and they are.
Just can't get enough of that love, that dove stuff. like you. But you know yeah, you're hurt for it, work for it, love. You don't always show it.
How good are U2's rhythm section? Adam Clayton, reliable, and Larry Mullen Jr. They're just great. I mean, if you look at any footage of U2 on stage, there's Adam Clayton is just standing there plonking away, doing what he's supposed to do, which is provide that basic foundation for the freedom, if you like, of the edge. Their performances are great, right from I Will Follow. There can't be anyone who wasn't impressed with the drumming and the bass playing on I Will Follow. All of the Joshua Tree, they're reliable, they're fantastic. And even up to present day, Vertigo, which they featured in the Live 8 concert from the How to Dismantle an Atom Bomb album, performances are great. It's very interesting that you feel with a lot of bands that there has to be a strong member and someone that follows. I don't think there's many bands around where all three of the players are actually so strong. Which may be the secret for why they're so great live. You know, they work fundamentally as a team, but it's like the edge soaring over the top of this just rock solid bass. And they're really, really fine. They're reliable players. You know, you never hear Adam Clayton playing anything that's, or not often will you hear him playing something that's, wow, that's startling. Certainly not like the bass solo on My Generation from John Entwistle. But if you focus on the bass and you focus on the drums on U2 records, it's always just exactly right. There's nothing inappropriate. I think they're fantastic rhythm section.
Because they've been playing together for so long, they have an innate understanding of each other. When one moves to do something, the other goes with them, you know. And that creates for a fluid yet solid rhythm section. They can move as a unit. So if Bono goes off to a different place, if he decides to improvise another verse, they'll go with him. That ain't a problem for them. And, you know, they look very relaxed. I mean, you know, they're in a fantastic position. They've got the Edge and Bono out front doing it all, and they just go, yeah, they smile at each other while they're playing. This is good fun, you know. Perfect, perfect. And you know, once again, as I hark back to the fact they're a family, it's a band, they've been together a long time, they know each other inside out. You know, they've supported each other through different problems they've had and got through all that, you know. Lesser bands might have chucked people out and, you know, blah, blah, blah. So, no, I mean, I think they are the backbone and the engine room of the band.
The advent of the 21st century seems only to have reaffirmed U2's place in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Bono and the band seem unshakable in their confidence.
Stop to the tip of the top, it's so right. On Saturday, it's live. Saturday, live.
When they do a track like Elevation, when they're coming in and making a new statement about a brand new album, there's a lot that it has to carry with it, and you look to the main performer like Bono to go, okay, where are you two at this point? How have you been? What are you going to give to us this time around? And he can really carry that off. He can sing that song which you've never heard before. He can perform it like this is the most important U2 song you will ever hear in your life, and he can do that with every new song. And the context in which they choose to do that, whether it's talking to a seasoned American TV presenter on MTV or a comedy show like Saturday Night Live, he can carry that off because he just really believes it.
The track is brilliant. It's a great show opener, and when you see Bono strut onto the stage and greet the audience, it's absolutely fantastic. It's an uplifting song. It's popular with the fans, and Bono is absolutely great. The mic in the air, strutting his stuff, you know, very reminiscent of the way Jagger works sometimes, although he doesn't have the swagger that Jagger does. One thing that always comes across is his confidence. You know, it's like he goes out there and he knows he's got the crowd in the palm of his hand, and it shows. Elevation is a fantastic track, one of my favourites from U2's live repertoire.
And something like Saturday Night Live, you know, they go on this thing where there is a lot of comedians and you're ready to be sort of put down by these guys, because that's what SNL is all about, you know, sort of taking the piss out of, you know, people and stuff like that. But, you know, for them to go on and do that and for him to be the way he is, it's, you know, it takes a lot of balls and stuff.
The Elevation tour was different. Just when everybody thought U2 would supersize, the band surprised the world by staging a subtler and more intimate tour. This was partly due to the fact that the tour included many indoor venues. More importantly, Bono, Larry, Edge and Adam felt it was time to get up close and personal with their fans once again. And thus it was that they went round the globe again, taking the heart of their music out to fans old and young, of whom there seemed no shortage. The last sight of U2 was during the massive Vertigo tour, which once again bettered anything that had gone before. The band had not let go of the intimacy and the trust of their audience that they'd built up during Elevation, and on Vertigo even found time to open Live 8, fittingly for them, the largest worldwide broadcast ever to the biggest audience on the face of the planet.
In the future, you know, their music, great as it is, isn't to everybody's taste. So they will be deemed a great band, and you can admire them in the way that you might admire Nirvana, but you might not have ever been a really huge Nirvana fan. It's not like saying, wow, the Beatles and the Stones, they defined an era, because I think we all look at culture and the pop culture these days in a different way.
It's an enormous body of work, and I think history will show that it was a lot deeper than perhaps some people might have thought at the time when the music came out. Yeah, there aren't too many fillers on U2 albums, so it's an enormously solid and a very good heartfelt body of work.
I think that they will go down as being one of the greatest ever live rock bands, on a par with the Rolling Stones live. And the difference between U2 and the Rolling Stones is that they are both a spectacle. If you go to a Stones gig, you want to be part of an experience and see a spectacle. You're going to expect that something's going to go out of tune and that it'll be a little bit rough occasionally, but it will be driving, hard rock, entertaining. That's what you get with U2, but with the added polish of the faultless playing of The Edge. The great performance of Bono, which you will always compare to Jagger on stage. And I think posterity will view U2 as being the end of an era, one of the last of the great European live stadium rock acts. I think their records, obviously their records are going to be important. How could you forget albums like Achtung and the Joshua Tree, and latterly the Atom Bomb album? But I think in memory people will tend to say more, did you ever see them at Twickenham? You know, did you ever see them at Boston or Miami? What a great live band. And I don't think that's any small thing to be left with.
I think they'll be viewed, obviously they'll be remembered as one of the great bands for their singles that they had, the great songs they had, the great songwriting, but also their views of politicalness and sort of they're one of the only bands who dare sort of try and merge the two together.
You say you want.
It's so hard to know where you rate U2 in history because there's so many different aspects to U2's history. I feel that their period from 1979, 1980 to about 1985 puts them as one of the greatest rock bands of their generation and probably of the last quarter of a century.
I think they will be remembered not for changing the face of music, but they'll be remembered for being craftsmen and great songwriters and a great band, a great live band, a band that continually cares about what they're doing and you know, not just with Bono and the causes that he is involved with. I think also they'll their body of work, because they haven't split up yet, could, one would hope, be even stronger in the years to come as well. You know, maybe they'll keep going for another 10 years. Who knows? Maybe they'll keep going for another 20 years. And I think as long as they want to do it and they enjoy doing it and they believe in what they're doing, they will then continue. So I think history will be very kind to them. And we'll see them for a truly great band and artists in the true sense of it.